3, 2. Hey, everybody. It's Paul Casey, Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame, educational video series. Very exciting day before the holidays. This is a little special Easter egg, no pun intended, for all of our Kenpo people out there. Santa came early, and we're going to be talking with 3 legends. These guys are the premier individuals in the Kenpo world, and I'm very honored to say that they're also all Hall of Fame members. Their contributions are unquestionable, and, you know, truly, the best thing is that they don't talk about their accomplishments. Instead, they share information and knowledge and give that to us so that we can listen to it and maybe incorporate it into our life. So we're going to welcome right now Senior Master of the Arts, Lee Wedlake. Hello, Lee. How you doing, sir?
I am good.
It's great to have you all the way from sunny Florida. We have from Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Senior Master of the Arts, Dennis Conatser Sr. Hello, Dennis. How you doing, sir?
Gracias. ¿Cómo está usted?
Okay. Interpretation, whatever that meant.
Hey, great.
And then
How
finally, you know, our birthday boy. You know, it is really, you know, Chuck, it is truly an honor to be able to spend time talking to you. You are 90 years old, and I swear to God, you're still the baddest ass I know running around there from American Kenpo way back when. Thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure.
You are truly are
a couple of months.
You are you're truly a treasure for us all. And so, you know, a lot of the people that we talk to in the Kenpo world, the thing is that they want to know about the past and they're wondering about the future. And the best thing is just to revisit that. So we're going to go back and look at some principles and concepts of Kenpo. And I'm going to have it turned around here a lot with my 2 other counterparts here. I'm the young guy here. I'm the low man on the totem pole. So I get to defer to them. And Chuck, we want you to take us back to 1959 when you walked in and you were training in Kenpo, Ed Parker Kenpo. And what was the essence of what Mr. Parker tried to convey to the students there in that school?
Well, you see, at that time, there was such a small amount of material as far as like techniques. Let's just call it what it is. There's a handful of techniques. Most of them were escape techniques. There was only a few punching techniques, things coming at you with a punch. And with those basics that we drilled on and drilled on and drilled on until our gis were literally clinging to our bodies due to our sweat. And then the wetness on the floor was due to our sweat as well. And we did basics. Then we would do a technique or 2, run a line, things of that sort, and then freestyle. So there was the 3 things: with the basics, a few freestyle, a few techniques, and freestyle. And the class was kind of mostly basics, some techniques, and then the freestyle. And what I witnessed during that time, from 1959, when I started in February, so I was almost a whole year of 59, through about 62. And when the split came, what I heard at one point was that Jimmy Woo, I'll use the pun too, he wooed these guys away from Ed Parker by doing a number of things. And one of them was he sold them on the idea that Ed Parker had taught them everything he knew. So if they would come with him, he would teach them Kung Fu. Well, I didn't care for his style, and I didn't care for his style of teaching. I didn't care anything about the man. So I was the only one that stayed with Ed Parker. Everybody else was lured away from him. But what I witnessed during those years, one of the things was, I'm sorry, I left myself hanging on in the loose here. One of the things was that he said, that Wu said to these guys was, he taught you everything he knows. So basically, I think eventually that got back to Ed Parker. And he said, wait a minute, I didn't teach him near everything I know. You want more? Oh, I'll give you more. I'll give you so much, you can't handle it. Another line from another famous movie, you can't handle it. Well, that's what he did. He started giving it more and more. I refused to teach the entire syllabus, even when he was still creating it. I couldn't see the percentage in it. You had a few techniques for inside of right and outside of right. You had a few for the inside of left, outside of right. What more did you need? If you could do those 3 or 4 techniques, the chances of you doing with 8 or 10 or 20 more isn't going to be any greater. It's probably going to be a lot less. So when we started in 1988 to create a syllabus that can be taught on video. I told Vic, I said, there's no way in the world that you can teach or anyone can teach the entire syllabus as Ed Parker has it today. I said, that has to be knocked back down to what it was when I started, because I saw people get so good so fast that it was unbelievable. And I asked Vic at the time, he's managing Parker Studio full time in West LA. I said, how many black belts have you turned out since you've been there? He said, none. I said, how many do you anticipate turning out in the future? He said, none. I said, it's too much. It's just too much. There are some that are going to get it and they'll have it and they'll do wonderfully with it, but they're outliers. They're like you and me and Dennis and yeah, we're the crazy ones. We stuck through thin and thin, thick and thin from the beginning till now. And you're gonna find guys like us, people that learn the entire syllabus. But I'm talking about the average guy. I'm talking about the guy who takes it for a couple of years and then he wants something for the rest of his life. I think we gave it to him. And I think the guys in the early years, they got it too. So that's why we did what we did. And it took us 2 years. I was 30 years in the art by the time we decided to go back to what we had. So at that time, I think I was pretty capable of discerning the good, the bad, and the ugly. We threw out the bad and the ugly, we kept the good. Bada bing, bada
Your
boom.
thoughts?
Well, I came up on some variation on the longer curriculum that Mr. Sullivan's talking about. And there's a lot of element of truth in that there can be so much that somebody just can't absorb it. And there is actually reference to a thing called Hicks's Law, which is if somebody throws a punch at a guy and he's got so many techniques to run through in his head to go which one, that he can't make a choice at all. And that's where you have a failure in being able to defend yourself on the street. So the KISS principle is really, really important. But I understand what Mr. Parker did by cataloging his ideas in that 1970 curriculum that he published with the 154 standards.
Dennis, your thoughts?
Well, you know, everything kind of changed when Mr. Parker came into commercialism. You know, there was a difference from what I was doing. I was not back in the 50s, and I was not back in the 60s. You know, I started in 71. And so, but the thing is, with my 12 years that I spent closely with Mr. Parker, I found a plethora of information, and being a history hound, I found it quite interesting. And I interviewed pretty much everybody. I mean, from Al Tracy to Joe Dimmick to I mean, anybody and everybody, Chuck Sullivan, Hebler. I mean, anybody I could grab, I could say, hey, what was it like? You know, what did they do? And I talked to Mr. Parker, and I was talking to him, you know, as far as the syllabus goes, and Mr. Sullivan's right. You know, in terms of teaching a pure self-defense, you don't need 1,000 techniques. You know, I mean, Tracy has today, I said something like 700, and you spend your whole life practicing sequential orders, of which you're not going to do. Now, in terms of what Lee said, I don't think anybody, and I agree with him, nobody can sit there and run through all these techniques in their head. In fact, in my opinion, the way I teach and the philosophy and mindset that I have, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. The techniques, as I, you know, was chatting with Mr. Parker on, the system was to build, you know, the base root of all that was to build coordination. It doesn't matter what the concepts, principles, and all that stuff are. If you don't have coordination, which of course, most of that happened during the basics and the few techniques at the start. And that's what built some coordination to perform virtually anything. So when you got into a tussle, you're not going to think about doing, you know, I can't see Lee Wedlake, you, me, or actually anybody else, and I'll put Mr. Sullivan on the spot. Do you think you'd ever do 5 swords on the street?
I would never do 5 swords in the dojo. It doesn't work, Dennis. It doesn't work. The technique is flawed from the beginning. After the second strike, which is the heel pound to the head, you're too far from that shot to the body. You're going to have to catch the guy, and then he's not going to bend over. He's going to keep it. It's flawed from the beginning. No, we've changed that 30 years ago.
And I just pulled a random technique out to say,
I know.
we're not going to do any techniques on the street. We should just be reading extemporaneously based on good basics good sparring techniques, and of course, learning some coordinative move, from the techniques and basics class, and then you should be able to sit there, because about the time you start thinking, let me see, technique one, technique two, right punch one, right punch two, I can't do any of these. So
My thought on this is I, as a young guy coming in, I was learning how this was all being put together. And, obviously I'm going in and I'm presuming that what I'm being showed is what you need to have and knowledge wise for to be able to be a martial artist. And it's not that. If you think back of it, I want to go back to two things that I always remember. I think two of the greatest ideas. Well, number one thing for me evolved was the equation formula. And when you think about it, that is actually where you're adapting, you're improvising. You take a specific attack and you give a specific response. Mr. Conatser always calls it, drills to improve your skills. I think that's it, the essence of it. I mean, until we can get some way around this, there's only so many ways this is going to happen. But if you go back to the first volume of Mr. Parker's book, Infinite Insights and the 8 Considerations, you do your homework, you think it through, you're going to have the right response. And the first one I learned from was reminded of it by Mr. Sullivan, is called run. I don't have a problem with that. I remember Mr. Parker saying that to me in the office, telling me several times, because I was thinking I was coming up. He said, Paul, you don't have to fight. You can come back, kick his ass the next day. and honestly, it's true. So, the essence of how do you teach somebody, Lee? How do you teach somebody to understand that these are just a collective effort of knowledge, but you have to learn the wisdom of where it applies?
Well, you're touching on the fundamental point, which is it's the methodology that the information is transmitted with that's sometimes flawed. And people think that they have to learn all of these techniques in this order and be done this way, where it should be these key points of origin that are illustrated. And then, as Mr. Parker used to show us, it's like, well, from here, this position, you can do this, or this, or this, or this, or this. And those variations are taught with different names. And so this looks like you have a whole lot of different techniques, where really it's just you have this one fundamental entry position, and then where do you go using your universal pattern concept? Where do you go from there?
What's the most challenging thing you have asked upon when you're in a seminar from, say, an intermediate student?
The most challenging thing?
Yes. What are they? I mean, they walk in and they think you're going to part the water and so that we can cross, so to speak.
Well, I don't know. It's probably, well, how come you don't have any hair?
Because you've been thinking too much. That's actually a sign of intelligence in the Italian community. Just want you to know. All right. Look at all three of you guys. See, that's what's happening. I haven't caught up to you yet.
I don't know if
they're all team school.
I'd have to think about that, because I don't know how many seminars I've done, and nothing springs to mind as being a question like that.
Sorry, I asked a question like that to you.
Most of the
Sorry,
time,
Lee, it's a little early for the holidays.
I think most of the time in seminars, people are looking for, this is kind of cliche, but they're looking for the secrets, and I remember Mr. Sullivan's response to what the secrets were, and Mr. Parker, like, secrets? I'll show you secrets.
There
And
you
he
go.
gets up, dogs you with basics for the next 45 minutes. And he goes, there's your secrets. Get good at basics. When you're good
There you
at that, you're ready to go. And so, but most people in seminars are looking for, I think this may sound funny, but they're kind of looking to be entertained. They would like to learn something
Oh, yeah.
that they can use and utilize, but they also want to hear a lot of, today, they want to hear about Ed Parker, because there's very few of us, all of those that are talking right here, all met and knew Ed Parker, very well. And so, and like Paul said, he's probably the the low man on the totem pole here, who's probably spent the least amount of time. Us other three had definitely spent more time, but Paul knew him, and Mr. Parker knew Paul, and he thought very highly of everybody in this call. So the thing is, people want to hear about Ed Parker and what he did and what he said, and a little bit about the man who invented the system.
How do you, I'm going to go to Chuck. Chuck, how do you just drill into the individual to understand that the basics are the essence of their art?
Well, you start with them. Now, you know, in so many instances, you go to a school, a person goes to a school and they get into the beginner's class, and who's teaching it? Some purple belt, some blue belt. I've always said that the most experienced teacher should teach the fundamental basics. Anybody can run an advanced class. Anybody can run a brown belt class because they know all the material. All you have to do is pick and choose what they're going to practice that night. And you can run a hell of a workout, a really great workout. But as far as teaching, they need to be taught those basics by the person that's the most experienced. And that's usually the last person that's going to teach them, unless they're his first group. You'll notice the first group that comes through in almost any dojo is superior to anything else that follows it, because it was the guy that was teaching them their basics. I've had, you know, you talk about a question. The toughest question I ever had to answer was, we started in a square horse doing our blocks 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, you know, the usual punches and so on. And then I switched over. I said, now I said to the guy, I said, now you're going to do it in a neutral bow. Well, he had practiced so long and so hard putting his hands on his hips. As soon as he got into his neutral bow, his other hand was on his hip. And I said, no, it belongs up here. It's got to have like a laser beam right to the middle of your target's face. That's where your punch is supposed to be directed. If you want to shoot it low, well, that's fine. You point it low. But in the meantime, it's got to be up here. So, all right, standing position, ready, left neutral bow and just neutral bow. So he gets in it and he's got his hand on his fist. The guy could not get his hands off his fist, which taught me something else. Tell your beginning students never to practice at home, because they don't know what they're doing. They're going to practice it wrong. They're going to get it wrong. Then you're going to have a bad habit to break in order to create a good habit. So don't let them practice at home.
Did Mr. Parker, when he first taught you, when he was teaching, did he put his hand on the hip, or did he have his hands up in front?
Well, it depends on in a square horse, where are they going to be?
Okay. But I'm asking you what Mr. Parker, not what, don't ask me.
In a neutral bow, his hands were out in front of him. Of course they were. He never had, no, not at all. They were out here. But the kid that I was teaching, he practiced so hard, his hand was glued to his hip, no matter what other position he was in. So finally, I put his hand up there and I did it again. And he looks at me and he says, well, if that's the way it's supposed to be, why did you teach me that other way? I mean, right in my face. Why did you teach me the other way? What was my answer? Because that's the way I learned. That's the way I learned. I didn't have a problem. I had no problem at all.
It's funny. When I was with Trejo and we were working on the heavy bag, and he tried to infuse a lot with the the boxing, and
Sure.
His thing was to put my hand holding onto my ear up here.
Yeah.
When I was, I don't know how that went with you, Lee, or Dennis, but Frankie would have me put he said, listen, Pablo, put your hand up here, hold your ear, and that way that you got this protected and you got the chin on the other side. And the only thing that's going to be left is this. Okay. That's the shot. They're going to get that. And you have that, you get that. So I said, how about if I just step back from the guy?
Yeah, well,
he didn't like
it. That
was the problem with me. I'd always ask questions like, nah, man, just do what I say. Hold that ear. And, I mean, damn, go,
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
Lee,
we have a technique like that.
Lee, you're dealing with somebody. How do you work with them on those basics? How do you correct mistakes with these guys?
It depends on the mistake, but an instructor's job is to find an alternate method when somebody's not getting we all have a go-to that we start with. Say, do this. If you're in a neutral bow, pull your toes in so your feet are parallel. And the student doesn't get it. So, I looked at it one day and said, how about pushing your heels out? I go, oh, boom. I got the same alignment. So This goes back to a very similar situation when you're teaching somebody and he's not getting it. And the next instructor walks over and says the same thing using different words. And the guy goes, oh, got it. I understand. So there's always a workaround to get the message across. And sometimes it just takes a lot of work to try to get that, figure out which one that is that's going to help them get the right idea. As far as chambering.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, as far as chambering, I mean, I've talked to a lot of traditional boxing instructors, and they teach from the chamber, working the heavy bag, so they get full range of motion. So they're using a similar concept, not similar, same concept we are, which is when we do a hammering inward, well, you're probably not going to do that, but you learn it for full range of motion, so you become familiar with the mechanics and how much power you can generate. And over time, you condense the movements. So your hands have to go to different positions. And then that's how you see most boxers hold their hands.
Frank had a way of answering. He said, when we first learn how to write, we do the block lettering.
Yeah.
A, B, C. And then what was the second? You use cursive and you go A, B, C. And then you just interpret the way you write. And what do? You write your name like that. It still means the same. But it's your way of, that's the same concept that you're talking about.
Well, yeah,
full range down to what is practical for you. What is the level right now, Dennis? What is the biggest deficiency in our Kenpo system that you see regarding the basics?
Teacher skills. So, you know, many of the teachers never learned the fundamentals properly or them.
Hello.
So they're passing on more junk. And then we have to come along in seminars or whatever, or students, and correct flaws that they have been, the question is, why is there always time to do it over when there's never time to do it right? And the problem with do it right is Ed Parker's system exploded so much business-wise that he couldn't get around to everybody. Consequently, he didn't have enough quality instructors. And so the guys that were the closest to him or that spent the most time with him were the ones that usually got the best information, particularly the ones that were hound dogs. And I like to be a hoarder. I like to be a Kenpo hoarder, and so I would try to hoard everything and ask him questions about virtually everything. Skip did as well. Lee did. Pretty much everybody, did. I'm sure Joe Demick would probably agree with that. Mr. Sullivan probably would too. People that were around him, had, not only questions, but good questions, not just silly questions that we have to recorrect. Because I know I've spent a lot of time, I'm sure Mr. Sullivan's done the same, where we've had to recorrect, and Steve and Lee as well, recorrect stuff that was taught incorrectly or poorly. So that's I think my thing is just teaching quality. Today I think that's been a problem for a long time.
Well, at least the nice thing is we do have people like Lee and Chuck and hopefully you'll return to the seminar circuit as well, because that's the only way we can get some kind of continuity and improve that, because it seems to be such poor basics. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I look at somebody, oh man, why are they standing so erect? Why aren't they in a proper stance? Why isn't their weight distribution correct? Why aren't their hands in the right place? How come they use only one arm when they do a form? Why are they skipping out half of you're laughing. I'm serious. I mean, I see this and I go, that's not how I was taught. Dang. Frank come around with a stick.
Yeah, Mr. Parker used to use that Sheena. You'd whack in the elbows if they were sticking out too far.
It's funny. You look at the size of the man, 6 foot, almost 2, big, large guy, and he had a very tight, narrow, condensed stance, well balanced, hands in the right place, not this wide, over accentuated, it looks good for a photo, folks, but man, if you had to move, it ain't gonna happen. I don't get it. Well, the system. Okay, Chuck, let's go to you at this one. How was the Kenpo system created by Ed Parker? What was the main purpose back in 1959?
Self-defense.
Again, say that again, sir. What was it?
Self-defense.
What's self-defense?
Mean, lean, do whatever you have to do. No rules. Get it done. Get the hell out of there.
Efficient.
Very, very, very. Get it done. No extraneous moves. Just get it done. If you can do that with a heel palm to the nose and break it. All right, I'll give you an example. Kid comes in one night and he says, you know what? This shit don't work. And we were like, oh, excuse me? What are you talking about? He says, no, he says, dance of death. Yeah. He's like, I hit this guy in the nuts and he went straight down. What the hell? I couldn't even do the technique. And I was like, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. It worked so well, you didn't get a chance to do the damn technique. Yeah. What kind of mentality is that? But what they were saying is what I said originally. It all goes back to the quality of teaching the basics by beginners. They're beginners themselves, for God's sakes. They have no idea what they're doing. And this is the one thing I remember when Ed Parker told me, Chuck, I can no longer teach beginners. I said, no, really? No, I said, I just can't. I said, really? I said, Ed, that's when they're blossoming. That's when you see the greatest improvement. And when they get solid basics, then you really got something. No, I can't do it. So, well, okay, I'll do it.
Wow, that's how you save lives.
He said the same thing.
Okay, so there's a transition. Here, Lee, what happened? Why did it was the commercialism that came in? Is that what happened?
The commercialism had something to do with it, but I think what Dennis was saying about the quality of the instruction, because there were a lot of people that didn't seem to pick it up one-on-one with Ed Parker in a class, private lessons, or something like that. There was a lot of people that their contact with Ed Parker was in seminars, and it just wasn't the depth of instruction. And he had told me the same thing he told Chuck. He said, I can't teach any more beginners. And he kind of shuddered when he said beginners. So he was working with people that were black belts like myself and getting us polished up. And I remember asking him, oh, yeah, how am I doing? He says, sometimes a carpenter would rather build a new house than remodel. Oh my God.
How flattering.
But I guess I did all right.
How is that new duplex anyway?
But it was just I think that was probably one of the things that he liked talking to me about, because I didn't have a grip on basics when I got to him, and I was a hot shot second degree that was winning all kinds of tournaments. And I told Bob White, I said, man, I wish I'd have had an instructor like him when I was a white belt. But those basics, my basics when I was a beginner were not good. I mean, they were just an approximation of motion. And when Mr. Parker taught me, he's like, this is why we do this and this is why we do that. And, it's like, oh, I knew somebody had to know this, but I couldn't find anyone where I was. And fortunately, I did.
Well, as lucky as that you also had some time with Frank Trejo.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And let's face it, that was a one of a kind individual. I was lucky when I met him. He inspired me with one quote. And I've shared that many times. And that's what made me say, okay, I'm going there. And the first time I was on the mat with Frank, man, he worked me over on those basics. That's all we did for an hour. And I honestly, I was very lucky. I was one of the lucky ones to have that. Dennis, how about you? What happened to you?
What happened to you, Dennis?
What happened to you, Dennis?
I'm from the desert, Arizona.
I know, but come on, really.
We were talking about basics. Some of my guys, they weren't getting the horse stance right. I teaching a couple of guys that were, mostly, at least first degree black belts. And I created this thing called a stance box. And I took 2x4s and had them make a square that was adjustable, and they had to put their foot inside it. So they put their foot inside one side and they put their foot inside the other side. Their foot had to be straight because they were braced up against the box, which it eventually became, instead of a stance box, it became Dennis's torture chamber, and it actually forced the feet inward, because the stance, the training horse, you want the inside of your feet parallel forward, not the outside, not the inside. And so, that really helped some basics a lot. But you know, teaching the system, Mr. Parker, you know, related to me once we were chatting about that. And, you know, when he came to class, he said we do basics for the first whatever, warm up the guys and do all that stuff, and then we start talking about a topic, and a topic might be, and I'll just choose the one that he talked to me about inadvertently, which was punching. He said, okay, let's examine punches. You can, when you punch, when you block, you can either work to the outside, you can work to the inside, you can step forward, you can step back, you can maybe go over the top, you go maybe underneath, you know, duck, bob, weave, things like that. And so he used the techniques, you know, for example, the first one, Dance of Death, he said it's for a right cross, basically. It's not a hook because you're forced to go to the outside of the opponent, not the inside. And so you do that, and the groin's open, so you can go to the groin and attack the groin. If the opponent, however, stepped forward with the right foot and threw a right cross, now the groin isn't quite as accessible, so you go into a technique, thundering hammers. So you strike the midsection on the second move. And then if by chance his arm was down and blocking that midsection, you could slide it up and go into the sleeper. And so, you know, he would teach in these series, and, you know, of course that spawned into width zones, height zones, and he started getting, you know, through the 80s, much more technical on the breakdown of these things. And these things are not new. They're just there, but, you know, you had to really understand them. And it was just interesting to think about that, you know, those techniques taught as a group. Today, we teach pretty much syllabus oriented, which is the you know, delayed sword, thundering hammers, and the sleeper are usually spread out through the system, when at one time they were taught more or less together at one time to illustrate a particular point. Did you find that?
Variations. Chuck,
Sullivan?
how about in the beginning, you said a handful of techniques. Were they mostly for grappling techniques? Were they
Most of them. Most of them.
okay?
But I got to go back to something that Dennis just said, because he brought up thundering hammers. You know, thundering hammers, where you come across with the forearm across the body, and that's what everybody does, right? It's the midsection coming across. Thundering hammers. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Your left is right, and it is right. You know what? It does nothing. You do not bend over. You absolutely do not bend over. If anything, you stand up. I had Greg Satterfield, 6'7", and trim and really, really good at the time. I said, Greg, I said, all you got to do is drop that into the groin. Now he'll bend over. I said, you're coming across the midsection. I said, hit me across the midsection. Now I ain't a big guy, and I don't have a lot of bulk. But Gregory does, and he hit me. And I said, no, Greg, come on, hit me. So he hit me again. I said, Greg, that's the way you show it to your grandma. You gonna hit me or not? Well, he said, all right, you know, the little ass, he wants, so he hit me. Well, I gotta tell you, it hurt. I think it actually moved my skeleton a little bit inside my body, but I did not bend over. I did not drop. I looked at him, looking straight up at him, and I said, now, does that scare you or what? What you just thought was going to be a hell of a good shot meant nothing. So we changed it. I said, Greg, all you got to do when you hit the groin. I said, if you'd hit me in the groin as hard as you hit me the first time, which was not even a good strike, I'd be out at the curb right now throwing my guts up. I said, all you got to do is relocate that. Now the guy will bend over. Not most of the time, every time. You whack him in the groin like that, he's bending over. Hit him across here, he's going to stand up and he's going to apply is what he's going to do.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to go to Lee on this. Lee, what if you can't hit the groin because something is the way? Why not go to? How would you make something like thundering hammers work? Are you going for a rib cage shot? You going for the solar plex?
The way that I teach, you know, I take the three techniques like Dennis was saying, you know, Dance of Death, Sleeper, Thundering Hammer. They go together, hit the three zones depending on how the man is positioned. And there's also this additional information that you gather by when you're faced off with the guy. You look at him, it's like, how tall is he? What kind of shape does he appear to be in? The Chinese will go as far as reading your face because they believe that the face can reflect weaknesses in the body and help you to select which target would be appropriate.
Is that before or after you hit him? Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
Okay. So, you know, you take these things and you say, all right, now you've got those three, then you've got a couple of others that are related to that, depending on how he reacts to these sorts of things. So if you were to go down, maybe go for the groin shot and he covers that up, you can bring your hand up and clip him and maybe break his arm like you're starting the beginning of flashing mace. Or you go short range on him, you go into flashing wings. Or you double it up, you pop him in the groin like Dance of Death, shoot your hand up along his body, strike to the side of the neck and go into the sleeper technique. So the guy should be learning is like, once you're at this position, you do one or two of these things. So you got to be ready to go to the alternatives, which are taught in those other techniques. And from what I understood, Mr. Parker would teach you that in that manner back then, instead of saying this one's called Dance of Death, this one's called Flashing Mace, this one's called Glancing Salute. You learn the different positions and say you react in this manner from this position, this manner from that position. Does that sound like what he did with you, Chuck?
Not back in the day. No.
No.
No, none of that. The concept was there, and you know, if he's in this, he's because the idea of somebody pulling off a whole technique. I think the only real full technique you're going to pull off is the laid sword, sword of destruction. But boom, boom, boom. I mean, that's something that's going to be right there. The first shot is you kick him in the groin. Now that's going to stop him from doing anything else to you while you chop him in the side of the neck. Basically, you can leave. But no, that came after. That came afterwards, and it's all valid. It's all good stuff. I understand what you're saying, and that's the theory of it. Now, the idea of it is when you get into, all right, say thundering hammers, thundering hammers. You hit him in the groin. I mean, you hit him in the side, across the body. It doesn't do anything. Well, what's going to happen with the next shot? You don't get the next shot. He gets the next shot because you didn't do anything really. You didn't stop him. So, and he's not going to stop. So basically, there's a shot in between your first shot and your second shot, and that's his. So what is he going to do? And when he hits you, are you still going to be able to go back to another technique, or are you done? Who knows? I don't like those in betweens.
Dennis,
I want to hit him in the groin. I want him to go down.
I refer to the 8 considerations. Environment, range, okay, is important. Position is important. Environment, range, position, maneuvers, targets. So the target, sometimes if you go across the body, like you're saying, I agree. I usually hit down to the floating ribs or low in the central body. And the only reason Mr. Parker would taught that back when was the groin was not open. So the best target when the guy was sideways was doing that. Although you can still kind of work around what I call the round the corner groin shot and get in there, you know. So you definitely want him to bend over. Otherwise, you're right. There won't be a second or third. There won't be any thundering hammers. There's maybe a horizontal hammer, you know, but you know, you're not going to get those other two in. So the idea is to hopefully bend him over, you know, and then of course, you know, beat him on the back of the neck and the tailbone area, you know. But so I think targets are real important. You're right. I mean, Greg Satterfield at 6'7", man, you know, hell, if I hit the guy across the chest, he's gonna, you know, polish his badge and say, you know, that didn't work, buddy. You know, you ain't gonna. I'm not even sure if I hit him in the groin if he'd bend over.
you know what, Mr. Parker? Mr. Parker said, Paul, you don't start at the top of the tree. And that's what I would say to you. You go right down his shin. I've yet to know anybody that can stop you. You know, if you strike him in the leg correctly, Lee, you're going to break his leg unless he's the Terminator or something. I don't know. And then you better run because you have to think about, again, it goes back to the concept, which evolved from the rearrangement concept, went into the equation formula. I mean, come on, you start adapting. Like Lee just said, he says, I'm going to hit you with the sleeper. I'm doing that. I'm going to the groin. Then I'm going to hit you to the groin, Dance of Death. Then I'm going to shoot that hand right up into the neck and take him down. I mean, he's improvising. He's like Eddie Van Halen playing guitar licks all over that neck, going from one end to the other and back. And everybody's going, oh my God, I didn't even see him go from that root on the first fret up to the 12th fret. How did he do that? Because he knew what to do, because he worked on that.
But Chuck's absolutely right, is that these techniques are taught ideal phase, and then it's, you do that, say, oh, he gets another shot in. That's what's supposed to be done in the teaching methodology. Your man is not supposed to stand there and just let you try to do all these things on him.
been
So
theory.
he should be firing and you hit, and then he tries to throw something else. If you got him canceled, you're good. That's how you test the technique.
Well, we're
favorite
at a point right now, Dennis, Lee, and Chuck, where we have to say it's time for the community, the Kenpo community, to come together and start reviewing and going back to what we really were about. You know, the idea of the basics as you learned in 1959, how it evolved into techniques and into or freestyling. And if we approach it that way, it will work for us. You know, my dad, when I was in school, it's better to be effective with one or two things, Paul, than to try to do 12 things, you know.
My favorite,
half-assed.
my favorite quote from the old man was, "I would rather have 10 techniques that I can fight with than 100 that fight me."
Yeah.
I remember him saying that clearly because I internalized that. I mean, that became my mantra. After that, it was like, good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. 10 that I can fight with. You don't
Well, I'm
even
gonna
need that many, but
I'm going to conclude this little discussion before the holidays here. And I'm going to ask you, Lee, any final thoughts?
You know, every industry I've been involved in, I've been an instructor in more than just martial arts, but they always have a back to basics cycle. It just seems to be a natural flow. And Bob White's got a nice quote. He says, well, why get away from them? But it's a natural thing. So you need to keep revisiting those. I mean, we pound the basics, but a lot of instructors don't seem to, for a variety of reasons. And going back and looking at those basics, and if you're like, I'm not sure, find somebody who knows and ask.
Dennis, final thoughts.
No, I agree. The problem that I feel, you know, that Lee just to build on that is a lot of people. Maybe I'll use the word ego. They don't want to find somebody because they don't want to admit that they don't know something, you know. And then I come up with a term that really everybody needs to adopt, which is each of us needs all of us. We need to continually probe and ask and question and discuss. I don't want to use argue. I don't like that word. Debate and discuss is two words I want. But each of us need all of us. Nobody's got the one answer. Everybody's got different journeys, and everybody learns something a little bit different along their particular journey. And I think that's important to draw from that.
Finally, your thoughts, Grandmaster Sullivan, about what we've been talking about today.
well, it's going to be difficult to institute great basics again because nobody has them. Really great basics. I mean, there are so few around today. I had the distinct pleasure at Dave Hebler, and we're about the last two that came from that era because everybody else either dead or gone or did something else. But we got our basics directly from Ed Parker when he was still enthusiastic about getting our basics, because that was a major part of what we were going to be learning and doing was our basics. So then I had that, and I instilled that in my people, and they still can do that. But when what happens is, all right, within, he said, I can't teach beginners anymore. Well, now had I gotten in my school and said, you know what, I can't teach beginners anymore. I'm too lofty for that. And then the brown belt that they put in charge finally make black belt and say, well, I can't teach beginners anymore. We'll get this on. Before you know it, you got the blind leading the blind. And that, unfortunately, is what's happened since the 80s.
Well, I'm glad that you were a beginner with Ed Parker.
I am too. And I'll tell you one thing he said to us. Again, it resonated with me. He said, when you're in a class, he says, take everything, every correction that's being made on anyone else and apply it to yourself. So I'd be in a class and he'd say, get lower. And I'd look around. I was the lowest in the class. You know what? I'd drop it an inch. Because he said, get lower. And I was going to be there. And whatever he did, I mean, he did it all. And therefore we got it all. When you go to Dave, I mean, he's got his basics, man. We've all got our basics. And that's how I started out. Like I said, I still got three guys with me from the early 60s. Stace McCash, Chuck Boyd, and Carl Calio. And they're still active. 3 grandmasters.
Wow.
And these guys were born and raised on good basics, excellent basics. So
Well, I will say
Their
this much.
lineage has continued to have good basemen.
This time of year is a time to reflect. And I am really grateful for the last couple of years that we've had these discussions on Zoom, having an opportunity to speak with people like Senior Master of the Arts, Lee Wedlake, Senior Master of the Arts, Dennis Conatser, and Grandmaster Sullivan. I'm very grateful for that because it's time to be thinking back and reflecting on it, because there are those moments that we've created with each other. And then there are those moments that we can reflect on with those that we cannot see anymore. And I think the takeaway from this is I came across a quote that I like. It's beautiful. And I think it's so relevant to today. I'm going to read it to you guys. It is better to have less thunder in the mouth and more lightning in the hand. That's a very famous Indian quote. And it's true. We have too many people talk about stuff, but they talk about themselves and their accomplishments rather than to share. And again, the Kenpo community is very grateful to have you three gentlemen to share your knowledge and your insights. And hopefully people will see that and they'll come and see you, Lee, in a seminar. And they'll ask you that question that I asked you.
Yeah.
You're going to have an answer that time. And I know Dennis will be out on the seminars next year. We're looking forward to seeing him at the events. And Mr. Sullivan, truly, I wish you and Laney the very best and the most beautiful Thanksgiving. And thank you, all three of you, for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Paul. Lee, Dennis, you're beautiful.
Happy
God bless
Thanksgiving.
everybody.
And
No further ado, Paul Casey, the Kenpo
Not too
Hall
much
of
wild
Fame.
turkey.
Take care.
Not too much wild turkey.
Adios.